Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 3911 AM. Today's date is May 22nd, 2026, and the title of the episode is The Federal Reserve Just Had a Regime Change. Trump Wins the Gold. Now, here's what your financial advisors won't tell you. By the time the news tells you to buy gold, it's too late. You're waiting. I get it. Everybody's waiting. Waiting to see if the ceasefire holds, waiting to see if the Strait of Hormuz reopens, waiting to see what happens next. But gold isn't waiting for you. It moves on fear, on instability, on the unknown, and it moves faster than you can react. So while you're waiting for certainty, the rest of the world is planning for what comes next. You can wait or you can prepare. You can't do both. Remember, the best time to put on a seatbelt is before the accident, not after. If you're ready to act, reach out to Noble Gold Investments. They help Americans protect their savings with physical gold and silver shipped to your door or held in a tax-advantage IRA. No taxes, no penalties to roll over a 401k or existing IRA. Visit X22Gold.com for your free investor kit. 5 minutes today could protect decades of seconds. That is X22Gold.com. Don't be the one still waiting, or just click the link in the description. And remember, past performance may not be indicative of future results. Investing in precious metals involves risk. Consult your financial advisor before making investment decisions. Let's get right into the economic collapse financial news. Now, the deep state, the corrupt politicians, the private West Central Bank, the World Economic Forum. You can see there's been a major change in the Federal Reserve. And I do believe that this is not just a replacement, but this is a regime change. And I do believe Trump now has his man inside, and I do believe this is going to allow Trump and team to finish the mission. And that is restructuring the Federal Reserve into the Treasury, removing the Federal Reserve and what it was designed to do, and that was to enslave the people. And you can see every step of the way, Trump now is preparing the country for what is to come. And to do that, he just couldn't say, hey, the Federal Reserve, you got to pack up your bags, you got to leave, we got to reverse the law, and everything will be fine. Remember, they had a very long time creating the system that they created. Trump needs to undo that system and actually create the new system to take over. And think about it. Since he came into office, he came out of the gate, he was running and created the new system very quickly. And you could see at this point in time, with just a year and a couple of months into his term now, he has now created a tariff system, a energy system, a technology system, a gold card system. And he's going across the world right now, removing what they put into place. Because when the time comes, Trump is going to make a move on the Federal Reserve and restructure the entire Federal Reserve. And I do believe Cameron Warsh is most likely the guy who's going to assist in all this and assist Scott Bessent in bringing the Federal Reserve into the Treasury. And once again, why would this be happening? Because we were never supposed to have a Federal Reserve. A Federal Reserve is a private corporation. And this is the third one in this country. It's the third central bank. And it's time to get rid of the third one. It's time to return the economic power back to the people. We know we will no longer need to borrow currency. We'll no longer need to pay income tax. We will no longer see inflation the way we see it today. We will no longer lose our buying power because of the inflation, which is the devaluation of the currency, which is the creation of currency out of thin air. Soon, we're going to see a sound economy. And Trump now is putting all the pieces into place. And in the end, gold is going to win. Trump is going to win the gold. And what that means is he is definitely going to bring us back to the Constitution, back to the gold standard, back to where it all started. Yes, there might be other technologies that are involved with this stable coin, the blockchain and things like that. But I do believe gold is a confidence builder. I do believe that he's going to be auditing the gold in Fort Knox. I do believe he's going to revalue the gold up to the current price, which I don't even think we hit yet. And I do believe we will hit a much higher price as we go along, because that's what this is all about. Remember, the deep state players, the central bankers, they had a completely different plan. They were planning on the Green New Scam. They were planning on the Great Reset. They haven't stopped doing this. They're still pushing this. They still think their plan is going to work. They think this is their mission. But in the end, it's going to fail, just like COVID and the vaccine passports has failed. This will also fail. And you can see those countries that went along with this ridiculous plan, they're going to be hurting in the end. I mean, we could see Germany. They are struggling right now. They were getting rid of all their energy. They were going to go to solar and wind. And that means they can't manufacture. So they had to transfer the manufacturing to other countries, a lot of it to China. And in the end, Germany was going to implode. They're imploding now. And you could see that with the climate fund, with moving everything into China, they were setting all of this up. And when you look at the European car makers, what did they do? They spent decades transferring their technology to China. Mara Nafal put this out and said, European car makers spent decades transferring their technology to China in exchange for market access. Now they're using Chinese factories to build their own cars cheaper and ship them back home. VW says it can produce an EV in China for half what it costs anywhere else. Nissan is targeting 300,000 exports from China by 2030. A Chinese-made Chery became the best-selling new car in UK in March. China can produce up to 50 million cars a year, but only sold 24 million domestically last year, so factories are desperate for volume. Chinese car exports have gone from under 1 million in 2020 to over 7 million last year. Meanwhile, some European factories are running below 50% capacity. At some point, competing with China became manufacturing in China. Nobody's quite sure when that happened. Well, you could see from the very beginning, this was completely and utterly planned. And they were shifting everything to China. And they were building all of this because they had cheap energy. Those days are gone. They're not going to be getting the cheap energy. Actually, the United States is going to be on a similar playing field. And this is going to be a very difficult period of time for China, as we could already see. And it's going to be a very, very difficult period of time for Europe because now they moved their manufacturing out of their countries. Some of it's in China. Some of it is coming to the U.S. And now they are going to be struggling. But again, are they going to give up? No, because the installed leaders, they have their mission. They have their task. They are being instructed to do this because they do believe in the end, they're going to win. In the end, they're not going to win because what has just happened? We just had a regime change in the Federal Reserve, and this is going to change everything. James E. Thorne explains, let's be honest, Warsh at the Fed, Kevin Warsh's arrival at the Federal Reserve is not a personnel change. It is a regime change attempt inside an institution built to prevent one. A supply sider now runs a central bank hardwired for Keynesian demand management, and the machine is already resisting the new code. The next mistake is visible in plain sight. Keynesians on Wall Street and inside the Fed are treating a supply shock as if it were a demand boom and calling for tighter money. This is dogma masquerading as seriousness, a choke point in the Strait of Hormuz, a jump in energy prices, and a cost shock rolling through transport, food, and manufacturing are not evidence of overheated demand. They are evidence of a damaged supply side. Monetary policy cannot reopen a shipping lane. It cannot pump more oil. It cannot repeal geopolitics. It can only crush demand somewhere else, usually with a lag, and usually in the most interest rate sensitive corners of the economy first: housing, commercial real estate, capital spending, and durables. Those sectors do not close the strait. They are simply first in line to pay the Fed's intellectual mistakes. That is the Keynesian reflect in its purest form. Every price spike becomes inflation. Every inflation scare requires a rate move. Every rate move is advertised as proof of resolve. It is nonsense. A change in relative prices caused by a supply shock is not the same thing as an inflationary spiral. Pretending otherwise is how central banks turn on external shock into a domestic recession. Machiavelli explained why change is so hard. The innovator makes enemies of everyone who did well under the old order and wins only lukewarm defenders among those who might benefit from the new. Christensen gave the same warning in corporate language. Incumbent institutions kill disruptive change because their processes, incentives, and prestige are built around the existing model. That is the real problem Warsh faces. The resistance is not incidental. It is structural. The test for Warsh is not whether he can sound tough on television. It is whether he can resist the Wall Street catechism that every supply shock must be met with tighter money. If he hikes rates into a supply-driven price spike to prove his anti-inflation credentials, he will not have broken the Keynesian regime. He will have submitted to it. This is not the 70s. Expectations are not unanchored, and the productive economy is already scared by years of policy excess, fiscal decadence, and institutional bias. The hope is that Warsh understands the difference between inflation and supply shock, ignores the Keynesian pundits, and refuses to compound one policy error with another. And I do believe that Trump most likely had many conversations with Kevin Warsh, explaining to him where all of this is headed. And I do believe in the end, Kevin Warsh is going to do exactly what Trump wants him to do. And you can see that Kevin Warsh is, by the way, is the 17th Fed chair. And he was sworn in the 17th year of Bitcoin, which is very, very interesting. Now, you know what's interesting? A bombshell study just revealed that GLP-1 drugs don't actually work the same for everyone. Your genes determine whether the injections work at all and whether you'll suffer the side effects. At nearly $1,000 a month, that's a brutal gamble millions of Americans are unknowingly taking. This is why I'm obsessed with GLP-1 Elevate. Instead of a pharmaceutical gamble, it uses clinical studied plant-based ingredients like metabolate to help my body naturally boost its own GLP-1 signals. The ones controlling hunger and fullness. No prescription, no needle, no generic lottery. I get fewer cravings, feel fuller faster, and actually keep my results without the metabolic crash. Get 51% off at trimwithx22.com. Every order includes free VIP coaching for life, a 60-day money-back guarantee, and free express shipping with subscriptions. Head to trimwithx22.com now before the offer expires, or just click the link in the description. So let's see how this all plays out. But what I do see right now is Trump has his man inside. Powell is staying on because the deep state, the central bankers, are going to try to stop him every step of the way, just like they tried to stop Trump every step of the way. They continually pushed against Trump. They tried to impeach him. They tried to assassinate him. They tried to indict him. They tried, and it always failed. Kevin Warsh, he's going to feel the same resistance, and it's going to be quite hard on him because, once again, the central bank system does not want to lose control. The central bank system knows if they lose the control of the creation of currency in the United States, they lose control around the world. What happens to the deep state players when they no longer can get free money, when you just can't print it out of thin air? All of a sudden, the deep state players and all these people around the world who launder the money through the system, all of a sudden, the money dries up. And what happens then? They can't function. Everything that they've been doing goes down the drain. And think about the economy. Once you remove the Federal Reserve and you're no longer borrowing currency and adding this currency into the flow of the other currency, you're no longer diluting the currency, which means we're no longer going to have inflation. So once that is cut off and we're bringing in external currency, what happens? Well, we're not adding brand new currency, so you will not see inflation. Yes, if fuel prices go up, yes, that's a shock. That is not inflation. But in the grand scheme of all this, you're going to see hardly any inflation. Actually, if you go back in time and you go back to the time when we didn't have a central bank, inflation was pretty much non-existent. And once we came off the gold standard, what happened with inflation? It skyrocketed because gold kept it in check. You see, once we were removed from gold, what happened? The deep state players could just borrow and borrow and borrow, and more currency went into circulation. It diluted everything. It's almost like if you had a glass of chocolate. The glass is filled up a quarter of a way with chocolate. You pour in a quarter amount of milk on top of that. You have very rich chocolate milk. If you keep adding milk, what happens to the chocolate? It's diluted. That's what's happening to the currency. And once this stops, what's going to happen? The buying power then starts to return to the people. When you start to remove the currency from circulation and you give it back to the original source, what happens to the currency? The strength of the currency starts to return. Your buying power starts to return. And I do believe in the end, this is what we're going to see. But before that, what does Trump have to do? He has to mitigate the devaluation of the currency as best he possibly can. How does he do that? We mentioned this many, many times before. You lower energy costs way, way down. If energy costs are very, very low, that puts a lot more money into people's pockets. Plus, it allows wages to go up because why? More jobs will be created because of manufacturing, construction, you name it. You lower the interest rates. What happens? It puts more money back into your pocket. It allows businesses to expand. If you're not paying a lot of interest on the debt that you owe, well, that can go into the business. It increase business, and most likely people are going to get a higher wage. As time goes on, you remove the income tax. That adds more buying power to you. Now you don't have to pay those taxes. When you start to put all this together, this is how Trump can mitigate the inflation. Plus, by bringing in the income from the outside, he can then give everyone a dividend, which again counters the inflation. And eventually, once the system is completely operational, the people are weaned off of the Federal Reserve. We no longer need to borrow from the Federal Reserve because we get the money from the external income system. Well, then you can start removing the Federal Reserve and you can start paying off the Federal Reserve. And eventually, during this period of time, what do? Well, you tell everyone that we have the gold. You tell everyone we have a lot more gold than we could ever imagine. And you tell everyone we're going to revalue the gold from $42 an ounce to the current price. And the current price could be anywhere from 9, 10, 11, 12, 15, because I do believe that the central bankers have been manipulating the gold price and the silver price for a very long time using the paper markets. And I do believe that is all going to come to an end. And I do believe this is where all this is headed. And what's very interesting is that Trump, on Truth, he put out an article that says, in the New York Post, that says Trump wins the gold. And I do believe in the end, he's going to win the gold. He's going to win the gold system. And it's going to return to America. It's going to boost everything up. It's going to be a confidence builder. And people are going to see an economy that they've never seen before. The entire world is about to change. And we just had the regime change in the Federal Reserve. So what we're going to see as time goes on, I do believe we're going to see everything start to shift. And we're going to shift away from the central bank system into the new system that Trump has been building. And this is why he's across the globe. This is why he's decentralizing energy, because again, he needs to undo everything the Federal Reserve has done. So I do believe we're going into a period that is truly going to be the golden era. And people are going to be absolutely shocked. And once people get a little taste of this, they're never, ever going to want to go back to a Federal Reserve system. Actually, I think people are going to question, why were we ever in a Federal Reserve system? Why did people allow this to happen? Why didn't people stop it a long time ago? I think that's what people are going to do in the end. Just like they're questioning the COVID vaccine with all the side effects. And people are starting to learn that the pandemic was actually a plandemic. So I do believe people are going to do the same thing with the Federal Reserve, because once you get a taste of a system without a Federal Reserve, you're never going to want to go back. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.